Open almost any web page and somewhere in the layout there is an empty rectangle waiting to be filled. You never see it sitting empty because by the time the page finishes drawing, an advertisement is already resting there as if it had always belonged. What you never see is what happened in the gap. In the fraction of a second between the page beginning to load and that rectangle filling in, a small description of you was written, packaged, and broadcast to a room full of strangers, and those strangers held a lightning-fast auction to decide which of them got to speak to you. The whole thing, the writing, the broadcasting, the bidding, the winning, and the delivery of the ad finished faster than you could blink. This is the story of that auction, the half-second marketplace for your attention that runs every time a page loads, and that almost nobody has ever watched happen. The empty slot. Start with the rectangle itself. The publisher, the site you came to visit, sets aside some of its space for advertising, because that advertising usually pays for the article or the video or the tool you came for. But the publisher does not decide in advance what ad goes there. The slot is left deliberately empty, a placeholder that says only something will be sold here in a moment. When your browser reaches that slot while assembling the page, it does not quietly wait. It fires off a signal, a request that effectively announces, I have a real person here on a screen of this size on this kind of page, and someone can buy the chance to show them something. That announcement is the starting gun. Everything that follows happens because an empty space on a page you opened just told the wider advertising world that a human being had arrived and was, for a fraction of a second, available. The half second, the thing that makes this strange rather than ordinary, is the speed. The entire auction is given a budget measured in milliseconds, often under a tenth of a second, because it has to finish before the page finishes drawing. If the bidding took as long as a spoken sentence, you would sit staring at a blank rectangle and simply leave, so the whole marketplace is engineered to complete in less time than a nerve signal takes to travel from your hand to your brain. In that sliver, a request goes out. Many separate companies receive it. Each sizes up who you appear to be and decides how much showing you an ad is worth right now. They send their offers back. A winner is chosen, and the winning ad is fetched and painted into the slot. All of it inside the blink you never noticed. Speed is not a small detail here. Speed is the whole reason the system had to be built the way it is. The bid request. So what exactly gets sent out when that starting gun fires? The message is called a bid request, and it is in effect a small dossier describing the moment. It carries the type of device you are on and its screen size, the operating system and browser, the general kind of page you are viewing, a close sense of where you are, often from your network address down to a city rather than a street, and frequently a set of interest categories, tidy labels some system has already attached to you, the sort of person who reads about travel or cars or new parents or loans. And threaded through all of it, most importantly, is an identifier, a long string that does not spell out your name but does something arguably more useful to the buyers. It ties this exact moment to a history of other moments already gathered under the same string. The bid request is not a wanted poster with your face on it. It is something quieter and more revealing, a machine-readable summary of who the page thinks you are, sent out so strangers can decide what you are worth. The broadcast, here is the part that unsettles people most, and it is the heart of the privacy story. That bid request is not sent to one trusted buyer. It is broadcast, sprayed out to many potential bidders at once, sometimes dozens, sometimes far more, so as many as possible can compete. And every one of those recipients receives the whole little dossier, the device, the location, the interest labels, the identifier, whether or not they bid, whether or not they win. Think about what that means. To sell one advertisement, a description of you is copied to a crowd of companies, most of whom will not win, will not show you anything, and will simply move on. But they moved on holding a copy of the request. They saw roughly where you were, what you were reading, and the identifier that lets them recognize you again later. The auction only ever needed one winner, yet the profile of you spilled to everyone invited to bid. It is less like a sealed envelope handed to a single buyer and more like reading your details aloud in a crowded room to see who raises a hand. The auction. Now the bidding itself. Each company that receives the request runs it through its own logic in the handful of milliseconds it has been given. It asks, does this person match anyone I have been paid to reach? And if so, how much is this one impression worth right now? It returns a number, its bid, along with the specific ad it would show if it wins. All those offers land back at the auction, which does the obvious thing. It compares them and picks the highest. The winner earns the right to fill your rectangle, the publisher earns the price, and the winning ad is drawn into the slot, usually before you have registered that the page was still loading. And then it is over. Every impression, every slot, every load is its own fresh sale, decided in the moment for an audience of exactly one, which is you. But this raises a real puzzle, and solving it explains the single most familiar experience anyone has with online advertising. The eerie sense that an ad is following you around. The puzzle is this. The identifier one company knows you by on one website is usually not the same string another company knows you by somewhere else. Each keeps its own private label for you. So how do they ever agree that their two different labels point at the same persons? The answer is a quiet, constant process usually called ID syncing or cookie syncing, and described plainly, it is simply two trackers comparing notes. When you visit a page where both have a presence, they arrange, behind the scenes, to swap their identifiers for you, so one can record my label for this person is also their label. Done across thousands of sites, this builds a vast shared translation table, a web of matched identifiers that lets otherwise unrelated firms recognize that their separate records describe the same viewer. No single company needs to see your whole life. They only need to agree on who you are, and ID syncing is that handshake. Why the ad follows you. And now the following ad makes sense. Say you looked at a product once, on one site, and the system tagged your identifier with an interest in it. Because of ID syncing, that interest is not trapped where it started. It travels, carried by the matched identifiers, into the bid requests fired on unrelated pages you visit afterward. So, when you open some other site the next day and its empty slot goes to auction, a bidder receives a request carrying an identifier it can translate back to. This is the person who was interested in that product, and it bids to show you the very thing again. The ad appears to chase you across the internet, but nothing is really chasing you. The same profile is simply being read out at each new auction, and a buyer keeps recognizing the same person and making the same offer. It is not a haunting. It is a marketplace with a very long memory. Who is in the room? It is worth being fair about who sits in that room, because it is not only faceless surveillance. The same machinery is how a small publisher, a niche blog, an independent creator gets paid at all, selling its space into a global market in real time and earning from a visitor it will never meet, without striking a private deal with every advertiser. And the buyers are not all sinister. Many are ordinary businesses trying to reach people who might actually want what they offer, rather than shouting at everyone equally. There are also referees present, the exchanges whose job is to run the auction fairly and filter out obvious fraud, because a great deal of money here is quietly lost to fake traffic and bots pretending to be human. So the room is genuinely mixed, funders and buyers and referees crowded in alongside the trackers, all pressed into that same half second. The defenses, so what is being done about the wide, quiet leak at the center of all this? The most consequential shift is the slow retirement of the third-party cookie, the humble mechanism that made cross-site identifiers easy in the first place. As browsers phase it out, the old style of stitching identity together through ID syncing gets much harder, and the entire broadcast model has to be rethought. In its place, several privacy-preserving proposals try to keep advertising funded while cutting off the leak, mostly by moving the sensitive part onto your own device. Instead of broadcasting a profile to a crowd, the idea is that your browser holds your interests locally and reveals only coarse grouped signals, so no bidder walks away with a personal dossier. Regulation pushes from the other side. laws that demand real consent before this data changes hands, grant people the right to opt out, and treat the careless spilling of a profile to dozens of unknown companies as something a business can be held responsible for. None of these is a finished cure, and each involves hard trade-offs between funding the free web and protecting the people reading it. But the direction is clear, away from broadcasting a person to everyone, and toward keeping as much as possible on the device where it began. The double edge, so name the tension squarely, because there is a real one. On one face, this half-second auction is the financial engine of most of the free internet. The articles you read without paying, the videos you watch, the tools you use for nothing are very often funded invisibly by this marketplace filling these slots. Take it away, and much of what people expect for free would have to be paid for some other way, or would simply disappear. But on the other face, the same system is a live, automated marketplace in human attention, broadcasting a description of you many times a day to rooms full of companies you have never heard of and would never choose, most of whom gain nothing from the sale except a fresh copy of your profile. You cannot cleanly keep the funding and remove the leak, because the leak is how the funding has been made to work. That is the genuine bind. The thing that pays for the open web and the thing that quietly discloses you to strangers are, right now, the very same half-second, running over and over beneath every page you open. What it is really about. So here is the part to sit with. Most people picture advertising as a poster, a fixed thing chosen in advance and shown to everyone who walks past. But that is not what is happening anymore. Every empty slot on every page is a tiny private auction, held for an audience of one, in which a description of you is the thing being traded and the ad is only the receipt. You are not the customer in that transaction. You are closer to the product being sold, page by page, and the sale closes so fast and so silently that you experience only its result, an ad that somehow already seems to know you. Once you see the auction behind the ad, the internet looks a little different. The free page is not really free. It was paid for, in real time, by a fraction of a second in which you were described to a crowd of strangers and sold to the highest bidder, all before the words you came to read had finished appearing on the screen. If this is the kind of thing you find yourself thinking about, the quiet machinery under the everyday internet, then this channel is your sort of place. There is no product to sell you here. It is just the systems taken apart and explained by someone who has spent a long time on the inside of them. Subscribe and follow the rabbit hole. Next time, we are going to look at the address that is supposed to identify you online, the string of numbers that every connection you make carries like a return label. It is meant to point at you and you alone. And yet, at this very moment, thousands of complete strangers scattered across the world are quietly sharing that exact same address with you, sitting behind it right alongside you without any of you knowing. And the reason why says something strange about how the internet really counts the people on it.